Hey, I'm Mark Hunter, the sales hunter. And have you ever thought about leadership and the culture of accountability? You see, accountability plays a key role in really who we are and what we define ourselves on. I got John Barrett with me today. This is going to be fun because John has created a course for the Sales Hunter University. And we're going to unpack some of it here.
That's right.
And the idea is that he's going to really show you what does this mean about the guardrails. And hey, if you're watching right now live, chime in with comments. We'll put them up on the screen. You got a question, chime in. So, John, why don't you give everybody a little bit of a background? People kind of know me if they're checking this out, but give people a little overview as to who is John. What's
That's
John?
right. Who is John Barrett? That's the question, right? Who is John Barrett? No, hey, listen, it's so good to be here, Mark, and we're excited about this. Everybody that's jumping on. I'm John Barrett. I am a leadership coach, speaker, and author. I've been in the trenches for about 20 years. I know I look like I'm about 25, but
wrong answer.
That wasn't good, right? But yeah, I've been doing leadership coaching, working with teams nationally, internationally, all over, and just helping them develop their culture, helping them develop their emerging leaders, executive leaders, kind of all in between right there. And so I'm passionate about leaders. I want to help them get better, equip them, give them resources, tools, frameworks. That's what I eat, breathe, and sleep is leadership.
Love it. Hey, Dan, welcome to the show. If you're chiming in on the show, go ahead and put in kind of where you're from or who you work for, whatever. We'll throw it up on the screen, but let's dive into it right now. What's the hidden truth about accountability? First of all, accountability gets talked a lot, but boy, there's 1,000 different definitions of it. So what really is what you see as the hidden truth behind accountability?
Well, it is. If I were to line up 10 people and ask them what is accountability, I'm going to get 10 very different answers.
You're going to get about 100 different answers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I'll get multiple ones from each person, and they'll probably conflict a little bit in that. And so therein lies the problem, right? Is that we don't really have a framework for accountability within our teams and our organizations. So whether we are the top kind of C-level leader for our organization or owner of the business, do we have a playbook that everyone is operating from where they all know? Or whether you're just leading a team, maybe it's a sales team or just a department. What is it? And this is the challenge, is that we have all these approaches to accountability. And so we've got some people that would define accountability as this, some people that define it as that. And then we've got this clash and nobody's really on the same page. So very first thing I always say that you've got to do is have a sort of global definition for your team, for your organization, whatever it is, of what accountability is, why it exists, right? Let's go back to Simon Sinek, right? Start with why, right? And just this idea of why is accountability crucial? What is it? Now, here's how I define that, Mark, is this. In the context of leadership, so if you're trying to create a culture of accountability, you've got to define what accountability is. And I'm not talking from the individual perspective of me being an accountable person. I'm talking about how do you bring accountability in your organization as a leader. Now, here's how I define accountability: supportive feedback to help people improve their performance.
Okay, stop right there, because that was powerful, what you just said. Repeat that again.
Supportive feedback to help people improve their performance. And all of that is strategic because it's not just feedback, it's supportive feedback, and it's helpful, and it's there to improve people's performance. Listen, accountability is not about the past, because you can't change the past, right? I mean, somebody did something, they missed the mark or whatever it is. What you've got to do is you've got to be able to deal with that in the moment, and you can't change the past. But what you can do is begin to give feedback and accountability so that you can help them improve performance for the future. Accountability is always about taking what happened in the past, but it's about moving it to the future. How do I do that? Supportive feedback to help people improve their performance. That's what creating a culture of accountability is. That's the heart of it. That's the definition.
Okay, let's break down supportive feedback. Yep. What the heck does that mean?
That's right. That's right. Well, here's the deal. Accountability, right? If you want your team to get better, improve their performance, all that, Number one, they've got to have feedback, right? How do you know how you're doing if you don't have feedback? I always say this. If you came and asked me, John, are you a good husband? Right? I would say, yeah, I'm a pretty good husband. I love my wife. I try to do, meet her needs and take care of her. But who determines if I'm a good husband? Me? No, my wife, depending on her feedback. Am I connecting with her? Am I connecting with that? So this is all about feedback and saying, how are we doing? If I came up to you and said, are you a good leader? Are you a good CEO? Are you a good sales leader in your team? Are you a good this or that? Well, you can answer that and say, yeah, I'm pretty awesome. But who determines that? The feedback based on the people that you're leading. So accountability is critical for performance. Why? Because it gives us feedback. It lets us know exactly where we're at, and it's supporting us to help us get better in the future.
And I love Jason's comment here because he writes accountability is not about the past. I think so many times we look at accountability as being a past tense activity.
Yeah. It's I'm going to hold you accountable for what you've done. Well, what good does that do for the future? Right? If I bring the hammer down on what somebody's done and say, you did it wrong, that's not accountability. Accountability is, okay, let's talk about what happened. It was wrong, but we're going to give you supportive feedback to help you improve your performance. This is all about the future. Accountability is about moving into the future, not just dealing with the past, if that makes sense.
Okay, you're putting a 180-degree spin on
Yes.
the way most people look at accountability, because most people look at it from the past tense.
Yes.
You're also putting a big change by saying is this the ownership of the manager, the boss, the leader, or is it the ownership of the individual? Because I always view it as accountability as an individual thing.
Yeah.
But you're kind of, again, painting a different picture.
Hey, accountability is a team sport, right? Like, this is all about creating a culture of accountability. So it's not just about me being accountable for my actions. That's individual accountability. Team accountability and creating a leadership culture of accountability is about creating mechanisms for there to be feedback so that we can help improve for the future, improve for the future, improve for the future. That's what it's all about. Most organizations, Mark, they don't get this right. And therein lies the problem. The reason they're not seeing performance increase is because there's not a really good mechanism or a framework or a playbook, is what I call it, for there to be an accountable culture. There's no feedback, right? It's not supportive to help people improve their performance. Everybody just kind of feels like everyone's looking over their shoulder. I remember growing up playing basketball in junior high, and I was a decent player in that, but I can remember I was so scared because I thought if I messed up, every time I would mess up, I would look at the coach really quick because I was so scared I was going to get taken out of the game. And so instead of being focused on getting really great, all I was doing was focusing on not making mistakes because I didn't want to get out of the game. And so there was fear. There wasn't this supportive mechanism to help me improve. It was me just kind of scared of this culture of, if I mess up, I'm going to get the hammer, rather than get the support to help me improve so that I can be the best MVP that I can on that team.
John, no pressure, but you're speaking to some brilliant people out there. Randy Pennington, who I put in the brilliant, says accountability is ultimately about ownership for the present and future. And again, this is a 180 shift from the way so many people look at it. I love it. Keep going, man. This is great stuff.
So the hidden truth is this. The hidden truth is that accountability is a great thing. It's not a bad word. It's not something to be feared. It's not something that we avoid or whatever it is. We have to literally begin to create this kind of positive idea of what accountability is. Even though it can be hard at times, we've got to create this idea that, listen, it's supportive feedback to help people improve their performance. Do we want to be the best? Yes. Do you want to be the best at what you're doing? Now, if you got a team that says, I don't want to be the best, you may need to look at getting a new team. But if your team says, I want to be the best, then you say, then we're going to create a culture of accountability so that we can bring out our best. Again, I can't be my best if I don't have feedback on how I'm doing. This is what great leaders do. This is what great cultures and organizations do. They have a feedback mechanism to help you get better.
And I love Rin's comment here, because Rin is saying it's about how we give feedback, but we have to know how to transmit it positively.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of leadership breaks down, because they don't know how to communicate it, correct?
Yeah. And nobody's doing it the same way, right? If I've got a team, say of 10 different managers, leaders within my team, even, all of those people are going to give feedback different ways. There's not kind of a standard. And so what I talk about and what we do is we try to help organizations and teams literally create a playbook, step by step, how to do this effectively so that they can be the best that they can be. And if you don't have that, then your team's rogue. You've got everybody on. Imagine a football team going on the field and saying, hey, listen, just operate in your strength zone, but there's no playbook.
Okay, so what's the upside to an organization because again, I'm all about the top line and the bottom line. Top line growing the number, bottom line growing the profit.
Yeah.
If I have a highly accountable organization, what can I expect my results to be versus if I don't?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think what you're going to see is, number one, an increase of performance, because people are going to know exactly where they stand in the areas that they need to improve in. So you're literally going to see people have more clarity on where they're at and where they need to go, because there's a mechanism that keeps you in this path. That's one thing. The other thing that you're going to see is a culture of feedback and togetherness, right? Where we're in this together. It's not about someone looking over your shoulder, bringing the hammer down, looking for your every mistake. It's about us creating this culture where we're doing this together. We're all kind of iron sharpening iron, working together to get to where we need to be. So I think you're going to see morale go up, which is so contrary to accountability. We think of it again as this like, I don't want to be accountable. This is crazy. You're going to pigeonhole me. This is all negative. Yeah. It's not.
Well, I love it because we have a LinkedIn user saying, accountability, should it be feared? And what you're saying is, no, we should not fear it.
No, we should embrace it. And here's the thing. We don't naturally do this. This is the challenge. If I were to go to your team or whoever it is watching and say, talk to me about how great accountability is, nobody's going to naturally say how great it is, how much it's needed, how much they want to be held accountable. Nobody's going to naturally go there, or I should say very few will. Yeah. So you have to train to this. You've got to begin to talk about it. Again, you've got to have a playbook, and that's what we help people create. That's what, the whole guardrails of accountability. We built an entire system that we go in and install into organizations that is effective, that helps people have a playbook to do accountability right.
And that's why Scott Plum out of Minnesota, Scott, haven't talked to you in a long time. It's great because you're saying everyone's got to know the vision. You are so spot on there. Hey, you love talking about, why accountability is so hard. You've actually created 5 different types of leaders.
Yeah.
Share with us who these 5 types, and do we need to identify, after you go through the 5, do we need to identify with one or 2 or 3 or what?
So I've kind of broken this down, the 5 types of leaders that struggle with accountability. And the reality is we are all going to connect with one of these at least. You're probably going to connect with several. And it may not be that you connect with it 100%, but there's going to be one that you're most likely that you kind of get trapped into, right? We all kind of, unfortunately get pulled into this. And that the first leader that I call is the exhausted leader. The reason that we don't do accountability is because we're exhausted. We are just mired in the day-to-day. We've got so much on our plate that taking time to do accountability and to create that within our team, we just let it go. We're like, we don't have time for it. We got to go. We got things to do. We got to make it happen. Now, in the short run, maybe that works. In the long run, you're going to kill performance because your team's not going to know where they stand. They're not going to be improving. They're going to be guessing if they're doing it right. So some leaders out there is what I find. In fact, a lot of leaders, they're just exhausted. And they're like, John, I don't even know how to have the energy to do that. That's why we try to help them. Okay, let's back up. Let's figure out what's exhausting you, why you're avoiding this, and let's figure out a way to jump into it. So that's one type of leader that struggles, the exhausted leader, which is a pretty high percentage one of many people.
I'm going to say right there that is a huge percentage because I talk to managers and they're exhausted. Yes. They're tired, and the employee is tired. Now we've come out of the Great Resignation, or the quiet resignation, all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
So people are actually having to show up for work, but still doesn't mean productivity is there.
Nope, absolutely not. And so we've got to be careful that we don't allow that exhaustion to keep us from addressing what needs to be addressed. Again, maybe you're saving some time in the short run, but you are making it 10 times harder on the back end of it because your team's not going to increase. Nothing's going to be different if you don't have accountability. It's just going to be the same thing. So that's one, the exhausted. Another one is what I can call the confused leader. And what I mean by that is they don't know how to do accountability, right? They're like, I don't have a playbook. I don't know how to go into this. They don't know how to start a conversation. They don't know how to bring it up. They don't even know where to begin. They're literally just, it's like they have no map. They have no framework for it. And that's the one that I love, because this is what it's all about, is creating a framework, giving you kind of a step-by-step playbook for how to do that. That's what we do in the guardrails of accountability. This framework is create that for you. So a lot of people, they're just confused. For example, if I were to sit down with someone and say, tell me exactly how you do accountability. If you don't have a pretty quick answer or a framework for how you approach it, then you don't have one, right? Like you're kind of making it up in the thing. It's kind of like the old saying that, the best time to have a map is before you go into the woods, right? Like not when you're in there and lost, right? So there's a lot of people that are just confused, right? That's one. Another one is what I would call, kind of the negligent leader. This is the person that just says, listen, John, these are grown adults. I don't have time for this. They got to be able to perform, and they just need to be able to do it. This one came about from a personal experience I had with a CEO. He brought me in, big organization, about $250 million organization. He said, John, I've got a team of idiots, and I need you to put them in the right place.
That's really encouraging when the leader is saying, I got a team of idiots.
Yeah, really, it's great. Really right.
Wow.
So he had a team about 10 people. He said, these guys are hooligans. They don't know what they're doing, and I need you to work with them. And I thought, wow, okay. So he's going on and on. I'm thinking these people are, terrible people probably. I start meeting with them one-on-one individually. Right. First person, I thought, well, this is a pretty good person. They really have a heart for the organization and that, but they're not getting any communication from their leader. So about the third or fourth person in out of the 10, I went, it was the same thing. And I said, all right, I see the writing on the wall here. Right. And every one of these people, great person, had a real heart for the organization, were really trying their best. By the time I got to the end, I said, every one of them from the same thing. They haven't heard from their leader in forever. They don't know where they stand. They get no feedback. So I go back to that CEO. Literally, I sit down with him and I said, I met with your team. He said, oh man, hooligans, aren't they? What do we need to do? Who do we need to fire? Who do we need to get rid of? What do we need to do? I said, well, you do have a problem. He said, yeah, I know. I said, the problem's you. And I'll never forget, he got pretty defensive. I was pretty bold. He got pretty defensive. He said, what do you mean the problem's me? And I said, well, when's the last time that you've connected with some of your team members and talked to them about how they're doing, where they're at, some of the areas that they need to improve in? Have you given them any feedback on when they're doing it right, when they're doing it wrong? And I'll never forget, he said, John, I don't have time to babysit these people. They're grown adults. And I said, well, I'll tell you what you're calling babysitting, I'm calling good leadership. Now, I'm not saying you got to go wipe their diapers and spoon feed them. I get that the individual has a responsibility to step up to, but you are neglecting just being a leader of your team. Everybody needs feedback. They need to understand where they're at and how to improve, and if they're hitting the targets or not. I said, you can't just hire a team and let them go and expect them just to be great performers without leaders. This is leadership 101. So anyway, long story short, after the defense, became a little more humble, began to change it around. And I'm happy to say this, Mark, by the way, this was years and years ago. That leader is doing incredibly well with a great team, and he's changed everything in his approach about how he connects.
I got to stop you right there for just a second, because I see this happening so often in smaller businesses now. Of course, I approach everything from a sales perspective.
Yeah.
A company owner, the CEO of a smaller company, will hire a salesperson, and they feel that because they've hired a salesperson, that box is checked, and they can go on and deal with something else.
Yep.
And the sales never come in, and the salesperson ultimately leaves or gets fired.
Yeah.
And what you just described hits that so cool. And I even see that in large organizations.
Yes.
Where sales managers say, yeah, I inherited this great team. I don't need to,
Yeah. Well, and I call it the negligent leader. It's just, you're not present. Listen, a leader that is not present is not going to improve performance. And I'm not saying that you've got to be overly there. And again, I'm not advocating that you've got to spend every moment of your time with people. That yes, they have a responsibility, but leadership requires time.
It comes back to that whole accountability piece.
Yes.
The leader's accountable to the people they lead, and the people that are being led are accountable to the one who is leading them.
That's very well said.
Continue on.
Yep. So that's kind of the third leader, the negligent. The other kind of leaders that I talk about is the uncomfortable leader. This is the person that just, whenever I say the word accountability, their stomach turns, right? They associate it with all kinds of like, oh my gosh, I do not want to address this. I avoid it. I don't like it. I know what I need to do, but I am super uncomfortable with it. And those are the ones that I look at and say, listen, I get it. Sometimes this is hard, but as we all know, great leaders are comfortable being uncomfortable. And unless you kind of get over that chasm to embrace uncomfortableness, if you will, and just get comfortable being uncomfortable, you're not going to grow. You're not going to grow yourself. You're not going to grow others.
So many leaders are afraid of that because they're afraid if they're uncomfortable, they're going to be exposed, and they're going to be exposed as not knowing what's going on, and they're going to get fired. I mean, again, it's amazing how that lack of confidence in doing your job holds you back from doing your job.
Absolutely. And they're afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing, approach it the wrong way, and that they're going to mess it all up and all that. Again, that's why we try to give that framework to say, no, we want to build confidence in you so that you know approach. In fact, the people that come out of our workshops when we do this guardrails of accountability, I would say one of the number one kind of most common things that we get are people that are kind of uncomfortable approaching this, and they walk away and they go, John, that you have given me confidence literally to how to even approach a conversation. I needed this 10 years ago. They're like, I've been avoiding a lot of conversations, because I didn't know how to do it. And because of that lack of confidence, I've just kind of been avoiding it. And I know I need to do stuff, but I don't know how to start or where to begin. So this is where it's really helpful. The last leader is what I call the inconsistent leader. This is the one that struggles with accountability. They're the kind of leader that some days they're your best friend and they're behind you and that. And then the next day they have turned on you and they feel like the enemy, and you never know what you're going to get, right? It's the moody leader. It's like one day I come in and everything's great. The next day it's, everything's on fire. And that inconsistency in your feedback is just jarring to people, right? And what they do is they dismiss it, because when you're really intense, they'll say, oh, they just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Oh, the boss must be coming down hard on them. Oh, they're stressed. And so they dismiss your feedback because it seems so irrational. It just seems so big. Or when you're kind of gone and distant, they just feel like you've checked out. So that inconsistency just is jarring to people. So we've got to learn how to be consistent with our feedback. And again, if we don't have a framework, how do we know how to measure that consistency if we're not kind of there in the middle?
Okay, so you've gone through the 5 really types of leaders. And at first one you described, by and large, the majority. How do we go about creating a culture of accountability to help us in whichever one of those 5 that we're in?
So here's the deal. The guardrails is where I get to go to the whiteboard, right?
All right. He's going to the whiteboard. Hey, by the way, I'm going to go and put you on full screen here while you write, because.
Oh, good. So let me pull this up here and kind of give us a framework. Now, when I built the guardrails of accountability years and years ago, it was all based on kind of technology. And this is how relationships work. And I began to see these parallels. I thought, this is exactly what's missing in relationships and leadership and organizations. And if you think about this, if this is our target right here, okay? And if you think about like a torpedo that wants to lock onto a target, we have this thing called INS, Internal Navigation System. It's a guidance system. The only way for this target or for this missile to lock in on a target is that it has to send off kind of a signal that it pings to that target so that it can lock in. So it's got to be able to have communication to the target. But here's what happens. When you lock into a target, that target sends out 2 boundary points, and it kind of triangulates where the target is. We don't have the technology for a missile to shoot in a straight line and hit the target. Number one, it's a moving target. Number two, we don't have science that's built on that. Maybe one day we will, or that, but we don't today. So what happens is this missile communicates with the target. The target sends 2 boundary points, sort of an A and a B. And what happens is the missile will shoot off, say, to the left. And it goes until it hits that boundary point, because it's always communicating in this triangularization. And then it tells it to go back to the right. And it does that until it fails, hits the boundary line, and it course corrects. And it keeps doing this It keeps failing and course correcting until it locks in on the target, and bam, we got explosion, right? We hit it. Now, this is exactly how relationships work. If as a leader, you are this person. You're the target, so to speak. This is your employee. This is the other person. And if we have a culture of accountability and feedback mechanism, what we do is we're working to try to get our employee, our team member, to lock on target, to be at their best performance, to be the best that they can be. The only way that that is going to happen is if we provide guardrails, tight guardrails of feedback to help people know where they're at. The problem is most organizations have really, really wide guardrails, if any. And so people don't hear about how they're doing until they're way out of bounds over here. And then all this, now we got to get them back into this path. And we don't have a system to do it. And
now,
this lies the problem.
I have a feeling leaders do that because they're lazy.
Yeah.
And they're looking for the easy button, the easy way out.
Exactly. Well, we avoid it. Again, all those different 5 types of leaders, they're living out here with people. They're inconsistent. They're uncomfortable. They're avoiding it. They're negligent, whatever the case may be. And so we got all these people in our organization that are all out here and they're not moving towards their highest performance. So how do we do that as leaders? How do we create a culture? Here's the key, is right here. These 2 guardrails is what I call them. These 2 boundary points of feedback. You've got to provide them. And here's what they are. This is going to sound so simple, Mark. People are going to go, well, that's simple. But here's the thing. What is simple is not always easy, and it's not always done, right? Here's it is. Point A and point B. Here's the 2 guardrails you have to provide. The first one is encouragement, and the second one is correction. These are the 2 things that everybody needs to be at their best. They need encouragement to know when they're doing things right? The old statement, reward what you want repeated, but they also need correction. We have to know when we're kind of, out of bounds and we're not, whether it's our behavior, our performance, process, whatever it is, we have to provide tight guardrails so that we keep people here. You can't do one or the other. A lot of leaders only provide this. Mm-hmm. You only hear from them when you're doing it wrong. Kind of like when I play basketball, right? I unfortunately, I had a good coach, but I was so scared. All I was focused on is what I was doing wrong, because I knew that when I did it wrong, I was going to get taken out of the game. So I wasn't playing to be great. I was just playing to avoid making a mistake. And so I feared that, and I got correction, but I missed this. Now, one of these is going to come real easy to you as a leader, and one's going to take a little more work. Now, it's not right or wrong which one, right? Statistically, encouragement's a little bit easier, feels good, looks good, it's not as uncomfortable. So that one typically comes a little easier, but this is one that a lot of people struggle with. But there are a lot of people that only do that, and they don't provide that encouragement that we all need. But if you don't have these 2 boundary points, how are people going to stay in the path to hit their target? And that's what the guardrails is. It's a whole system of how you create this. And then there's 5 checkpoints along the process that you got to get right that we've kind of put together in this.
Wow. That's absolutely huge, because again, I'm going to go ahead and pop up here into the chat the link, because what you've talked about is just really a quick piece. But boy, you've got so much more in this whole guardrails of accountability. Now, let's back this up here a little bit, because if I'm a leader, we'll say I'm a leader that's been around for a while. What would you suggest I do as the first thing to kind of correct myself?
Well, I think first of all I think there's that personal buy-in. You've got to look at yourself and say, how am I doing on these guardrails? Am I providing these 2 points of communication effectively and consistently? And again, remember I said earlier, if you asked me if I was a good husband, I would say, well, of course I am. But who determines? My wife does. So this is going to be, a lot of leaders don't do this, but a great leader does. The only way that you know if you're doing that well is not to self-assess how you're doing. You've got to go to your team, your inner circle, and say, guys, gals, how am I doing on giving feedback and being present to our team? That can be a humbling and sobering question.
And that's tough for a lot of leaders to do.
Very tough. But here's the thing, Mark, it's what separates average leaders from great leaders.
Now, here's a situation. I see a lot of bad organizations where leadership may ask that, but the people are fearful of giving the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a whole nother. Yeah, and this is where I go back and say, okay, so we got a lot of ground to cover to get there. You don't change this overnight, right? You don't change a culture overnight. You don't turn the Titanic overnight. So this is where I go back though and say, okay, but what are you doing then to create a culture of accountability where everybody feels they know what we're doing and why we're doing it? This isn't like, proprietary information for just the managers. This is something that everyone in your organization needs to be exposed to and see. Your line level employee needs to know what is the heart behind accountability. What can I expect from my leader? Well, here's in our playbook, here's what we do in this organization. As a team, as leaders, here's what you can expect. You're going to get encouragement when things are going right, and you're going to get correction because we want to be in the path of progress. Why? Because we believe that accountability is supportive feedback to help you improve your performance. And we are committed to you to be your best. So you got to back up and begin to say, all right, how do we start creating this culture? And how do we begin to expose our team to it? How do we begin to have a playbook for it so that we can start to turn that and create a culture that isn't fearful to give feedback? It doesn't, it's not this inconsistent thing, but we literally have a whole framework on why we're doing it and how to do it. That can change over the course of months and months, an entire organization.
John, what you've described, again, you've just shared just a few pieces out of your masterclass, the guardrails of accountability, and we're offering it. I put the link in there in the chat, and it's funny, but the more I look at it, the more I examine it, I go, this thing should be thousands of dollars, and yet it's only $98. So
it's a game changer.
Which really, if you stop and think about this, when you look at something like that, for that low of an investment, you really don't have to do much to get an ROI, return on investment. And yet, if you really identify which one of those 5 that you're in and begin to develop your playbook, it is amazing what's going to happen.
It's a game changer, Mark. Listen, let me give you a good example. In 1905, right, the football league in America.
Sorry, I wasn't around in 1905.
Well, yeah, I get that. 1905, the football league in America, right? Brutal. It was a brutal sport. In fact, there were over 20 deaths in 1905. That's how brutal the sport was. We adapted from rugby, the Australian, game. And so, paths were very, limited, and it was brutal. Well, President Roosevelt and, all kinds of other people came together and basically said, we're going to change rules going into the 1906 season. One of the big rules that they changed was they legalized the forward pass. Now, we know this today as a normal thing, but we took American football from rugby. In rugby, you can only do a lateral pass or, behind you. You can't do a forward pass. So they said, you know what, we're going to change it. So they legalized the forward pass. Everybody was resistant. Nobody wanted to do it. They thought this is ridiculous. There was one college football team that had adopted it. It was the University of St. Louis. The entire preseason, they built their whole framework around the forward pass. Now, going into the 1906 season, they obliterated the competition. They went 22-0. Now, check this out. That's not even as impressive as this stat. Back then, football was scored in 1 to 2 points, not today, 6 and 7, 1-point conversion and all that. So 2 points. They outscored their opponents, right? Their opponents scored a total of 11 points the entire season out of 22 games. St. Louis scored 402.
Wow.
It changed the whole game. Ever since that season in 1906, guess what happened the next season? Everybody adopted the forward pass as we know it today, right? Now, I share that story because here's the deal. If you don't have a playbook and a framework, if you don't invest into that and begin to put attention into that, then you're going to go into the game and you're going to always be wondering, why are we not winning more? And it very likely is that the inner culture of your organization, you do not have a culture of accountability. If you'll create the playbook, you're going to begin to see yourself outscore your competition.
What you've just described is something that is not complex. It's really quite basic.
Yep.
But it's just understand the fundamentals of what accountability are,
Yeah.
and how you communicate and lead in that type of world.
It's a game changer. In fact, in the course, that masterclass, this is just kind of the science of what it's built off of. But in there, what we do is we go through the 5 checkpoints of, well, encouragement corrections seem really simple. I mean, I'm doing that, John. Well, hold on, time out, slow down. Are you? Because there's a way that you've got to do this. That's where the 5 checkpoints come in along the system. And that's a game changer. That's where we kind of unpack exactly how do you give encouragement correction. Because if you don't do it right, you may have the idea down of encouragement correction. That seems simple. All of us are like, well, I know how to do that. Well, hold on now. There's more to it than that. And that's where we go into the 5 checkpoints to really help people understand, how do I deliver that in an effective way? And that's where we really get into the trenches to help you create that playbook that everybody can live out of, so that you've got literally a culture of accountability, that your leaders, managers, supervisors, but even your frontline teams, they know exactly what to expect. And all of a sudden now we begin to see performance just lift. And Mark, we've been doing this for decades, helping organizations do this. And it's a game changer. I mean, we the whole wake of organizations we worked with, it changes the whole game for them.
Yeah.
So it works.
And again, it's not complex.
No.
It's block and tackle.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. It's complex, but like any great teacher, right? Pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
You've simplified it so that it makes it digestible, right? And it makes it accessible.
And I'm thinking, when you simplify it, it's easier for the employees to actually grasp it.
Yes, at all levels. You don't have to, be at the highest level here.
Wow.
No matter where you're at, we can wrap our mind around. In fact, we actually teach the guardrails of accountability a lot of times for the entire organization. It's not even just to the leaders and supervisors. We actually talk about and we expose this whole framework to even your line level frontline employee, so that they have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing and how it works, so that we're all on the same page, kind of playing out of the same playbook. So it's not just for leaders, although that's the start, but it's really to expose everybody. And that's where that masterclass is going to give you all kinds of helpful tips, tricks, tools, resources for how to do this.
Yeah. Hey, we got a LinkedIn user who says, hey, thank you for making this available. How do I get my whole team through this?
Yeah.
I want to suggest that probably, of course, they can get the course, but then reach out to you, John Barrett, because again, you do this all the time in companies that you happen to be working with worldwide, right?
Exactly. Yep. So we deliver this in so many different ways. A lot of times we'll come in, do a workshop. Usually it's about a 3-hour workshop that we'll do. We can do that virtually, in person, and that we love to do it in person, just, so that we can kind of get that interaction. But we've got a whole kind of playbook. We've got a workbook where we literally bring everybody through this and teach this to the entire organization. So yeah, johnbarrettleadership.com. You can reach out and connect with us. We'll set up a discovery call to talk about it. But that master class is a great way to start, just to get the idea and then figure out, how do I roll this out to my entire team? That's where we want to work with you on doing it right, because it's not just, hey, watch this or listen to this, or, hey, I saw this. Does that make sense? There's more to it, right? We're giving you a very high level, but when you really begin to bring your whole team into it, this is where it changes the whole game for your future.
And John, your website, johnbarrettleadership.com.
Yes.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yep. That's it.
Hey, this has been absolutely terrific, because you've spun the term accountability from the way the average layperson looks at it. You spun it 180 degrees.
Yeah.
You made it going up in the organization and down in the organization.
Yes.
And you've really helped frame which one of the 5 types of individuals we are when we are leading. So, John, thank you so much. I do encourage people, grab the course.
Yes.
Because it really is a game changer out there. So, John, thanks so much. And of course, you're on LinkedIn also, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm floating out there everywhere.
Good. I love it. John, thanks for showing up. Thanks for sharing. This was something I wanted to get out there to show people about. So, hey, my name is Mark Hunter, the Sales Hunter, and this course that John's talking about is part of the Sales Hunter University. It's one of the things that I do. I like to keep my focus around sales. So I bring in experts like John, to put a course out there to make it available for others. So, John, thank you so much. And we will see you in the next leadership session.
That's right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks everybody.